This is a Triple J podcast.
Hello, welcome back to the Science with Dr. Karl podcast. My name is Lucy Smith, and on this episode, Karl and I finally get the answer to a question we have been asked for years, and it's usually come from people who have been pregnant or gone through chemotherapy. The answer came from our mate, Dr. Teresa Larkin, who joined us on the show today, answering all of our human body questions. Let's jump in. We are doing Science with Dr. Karl. Karl joins us right now, and also Dr. Teresa Larkin, friend of the show, has been on the hookup before. Teresa, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
We're very well, thank you. Dr. Karl, how are you?
Ever so peachy keen. I'm now going to try to make my skin transparent later today.
Why?
Well, some scientists ask themselves, how come I can't see the inside of your body? And the answer is, being a pure scientist, because your skin's opaque. And why is it opaque? Because the different tissues bend the light differently, and the light is absorbed and scattered. And they said, well, how can we get around that? Why don't we soak it in a chemical that will balance that all out? And they went theoretically into the Dunning-Kruger equations and Lorentz transforms and stuff I don't understand, with equations with all squiggly marks, and out came the food dye that's used in yellow chips. Food dye yellow 05 or E102. So I tried it with food, and they painted it onto a thin slice of raw chicken breast, and suddenly it became transparent. They could see the breadboard underneath it. They then painted it onto the tummy of a mouse, and they could see the guts inside moving around. And they painted it onto the leg of a mouse, and they could see the muscle fibres. I tried some ordinary food dye at home, yellow food dye, but it had only 1% of E102, and I thought I could see something, but maybe not. Being obsessive, I then went and bought 87% raw powder, and I'm going to try today to see if I can see, especially where the skin is thin, like on the back of your hands, if I can see the tendons moving. So how am I? Embarked on an experiment that I don't know the result of.
So you're just going to paint it on? Is that the deal?
Yeah, it's food dye, so it's perfectly safe.
Okay.
And then you can take it off again later, and everything should be all right. Or I may well be the invisible man, and you'll hear my voice haunting the corridors of Triple J. Where are you? I can see you. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
You're on a book tour at the moment. You can't be invisible. You need to show up.
Though there's some very good advice in my book, like never have sex with anybody who has more problems than you do. Mm-hmm. Most people never learn that advice until very late in life. And also, in public buildings, the toilets are usually near the elevators.
Why?
Well, you've got this sort of service duct, so you're going to have humans over here, and then you're going to bring in electricity and movement and water and the internet, so you tend to put them all in a single service duct, and that's why they're all together in one place. Most people never learn that. I learned that when I was a doctor in the gastro unit at a hospital, and we had patients who had inflammatory bowel disease, and to my surprise, every time they left the house, their journey was plotted by availability of public toilets. I had deep sympathy for them, and they taught me this important advice. So, dear listener, your life will be better. Now you know how to find public toilets.
If you want to get more advice like this, Dr. Karl's memoir is out now. It's called A Periodic Tale. Now, Teresa, we've gotten you on before to answer questions about the human body. What are some things that you've worked on recently?
So I have had a few conversation articles out recently since the last time. So we wrote one on heart rate and how that can change with different sports and at resting, inspired by the Olympics. I've written a few more about blood. That was a curious kids question where a child writes in and asks, why is blood red? And then in terms of my research, so we've actually got research coming out soon about some chronic pelvic pain. So we've been looking into a different form of chronic pelvic pain, which is caused by a vascular cause. So when people's veins in their pelvis can become compressed or, sort of pushed down, pushed together, and that can actually cause backup of blood into the organs. We're looking at it in females, can cause sort of, congestion around the uterus, and it's a form of pelvic pain that wasn't traditionally as well known. So I'm working on that with a vascular surgeon.
Wow. Okay. So if you've got any questions about all of the above, you did see that we were donating blood this morning.
Exactly. I heard that and thought, oh my God, this is perfect. Yep. Love all that about the blood groups. Obviously hormones. I always love hormones. That's one of my favourite areas to teach.
Okay.
So anything. Love the human body. And I can't believe Karl's just offering away by which we might be able to see into the human body.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be trying it this afternoon. They were produced, these papers, in peer-reviewed journals, Science and Nature. But today, science literacy is so low that many people think that if you click on a link, it must be true. And it ain't necessarily so, bro.
We've got Shane in Perth who is kicking us off. Shane, what do you want to know?
I want to know if there's any adverse effects if you hold on to your urine for way too long.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, don't you? But it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, look, our kidneys are really efficient. The kidneys are such great organs. Most people have 2 of them. And they actually process 180 litres of fluid per day. And on average, we usually only urinate around 1.5 litres per day. So that shows us how active the kidneys are in determining which part of our blood passes out to the urine to leave and what things stay in. So we can obviously wee much less or much more depending on what we're drinking, but if we are holding our urine in, there's a few things that can happen, and the first is that can send signals of that we have an increase in blood pressure. If someone held their urine in and didn't urinate for a really long time, then that has a risk of, and this is obviously for a long time, that has risk of, because it's going to sit in the bladder, it can make them prone to infection in the bladder. It could even back up towards the ureters, which are the tubes that come from the kidney. But the main thing is that it would just, make the kidneys not work as well, but it will send signals also of stress to the body because it's kind of a stressful situation. So, yeah, it's something that it's related to blood pressure as well.
What does a long time look like, do you reckon?
Oh, so what feels long for you, dear listener?
I've had some mates, because we've got a festival coming up this weekend, I've had some mates get to about 10 hours, 12 hours, and they have been busting for that 12 hours, and they're just struggling, and they're doing like pelvic floor muscle exercises, everything they can, laying down, squatting,
it's so true,
they
Shane.
just cannot get it.
Yeah.
People who want to get the
I think
barrier and they've
struggling.
got to wait, yeah.
So there's things for it and against it. For it is that you are training your bladder to be able to empty only when it's really full. The against is that you've got little tiny flap valves in the top of, not flap valves, just sort of muscular constrictions in the top of the bladder. It's shaped like an upside-down pyramid. And if you have urine flowing upstream, it can then go back to the kidneys, which wouldn't be a problem unless you've already got bacteria in your in your bladder, and that can happen, coming up the end of the urethra, and then you can end up with a bad kidney infection. Your kidney, they pass the liquid into the bladder at the rate of 1 mil per minute per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh 80 kilograms, you get 80 mils per hour on average. And it's like a piano accordion. It sort of stretches and then stretches a bit more. And it's good to do a bit of stretch, but not too much. And for people who urinate too often at night, they do teach them squeeze those knees, and hold those wees. But a little bit is good, but too much is bad.
Okay, good to know. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
fair.
Shane.
Thank you. Bye, doctors.
We've got Katie in Penrith. Now, Katie, you've got a question about blood types.
Hey doctors, my question is, I'm O negative, my husband's O positive. We recently just had a baby and I had to have injections during pregnancy and after. What's the go with that?
Yeah, that's a really common, it's something that people talk about in pregnancy, and women who are pregnant will get their blood checked to see if they are positive or negative in whichever blood group they are. And so what that is it's a certain protein that's on the blood cells, and when someone is a negative, they don't have those proteins, which means that if they came into contact with blood that was positive, that does have those proteins, they're foreign to the negative person's body. So the person with the negative blood thinks, their immune system thinks, oh my goodness, we've got something here that's potentially an invader, potentially damaging. So during pregnancy, the mother and the fetus's blood don't normally mix, so to speak, but you can get a little bit of mixing, and especially during childbirth. So to avoid then the mother setting up a bit of a defence and potentially causing, making these antibodies that can then destroy or affect the fetus's blood, they give these injections of a certain immunoglobulin that will then stop the mother's response in that way. And so especially they'll do that for any future pregnancies, because even if a woman has had a a positive baby, like a blood positive baby, and they haven't developed as many antibodies during that pregnancy. But then if that woman who's blood negative has another pregnancy with a blood positive baby, they can set up and have even more of those antibodies. So it's to protect the fetus and to make sure that its blood is not attacked.
So the baby is reacting to the part of the DNA, the immune system signals that is not her, to the father's immune system or chemicals, and then in a second pregnancy you're saying could really mount a big response and actually knock off the baby.
Yeah, so it's more that if there's, say, for example, a woman who's O negative and a man who's O positive in this case, then the baby is likely going to be positive. And so it's because of the baby's own genetics and the baby's own blood type. And then if there's a mixing of that and if the mother's blood sees that baby's blood, it thinks this is foreign. And so it sets up that defence system, which can affect that particular pregnancy or future pregnancies.
Wow. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
I love that you say blood positive baby here. I'm thinking like positive baby.
I know, yeah.
They're really happy. They're really optimistic.
Yeah, I thought better clarify that. The blood positive. Yeah.
We got Bruce in Winston Hills. Now, Bruce, you've got a question about allergies. What's gone on?
Yes, so about 4 years ago, I was given some amoxicillin, about 4 capsules before a tooth removal. I broke a tooth and they said half an hour before the extraction, and by the time I got down to the dentist, my hands were itching, and I walked into the surgery and my face and lips were going numb, and they said, "Oh, you don't look too good. We'll take you down to the medical centre." But halfway down there I collapsed and ended up having an anaphylactic reaction to the penicillin. So I ended up in hospital on a drip, and I'd had penicillin many times over the years for different things, for sickness and for infections from cuts and stuff. And then suddenly I'm allergic to it. I had all the doctor's tests afterwards and they came up negative, but then they say, "Oh no, well you better presume that you are now allergic to penicillin." So I have to wear a red cap if I'm in hospital now.
Oh, really? Wow. What does the red cap mean?
Means you're allergic to something.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So
The
what,
first thing they ask you is, what are you allergic to?
Okay, so what's happening is that you're having an anaphylactic reaction. Ana means wrong. Phylaxis is to guard. So you're guarding wrongly against something you don't need to, and you're getting the inflammation thing. And because your tissues were getting inflamed, they were soaking up liquid and they were squashing the nerves, which is why you were losing sensation. And then the next stage is that you keep on expanding tissues and you can't breathe and then you die. Hooray for adrenaline, and in fact you live in Australia. So there's 4 different things going on. The first one is that you may well have had reactions in the past, but they were so small you didn't notice it, and it was this time that it got bigger. The second thing is that your immune system could have changed and you became more sensitized over time because your immune system is always changing in reaction to what's going on. The third one is that your immune system might have cross-reacted to something, like you might have had a hamburger with a delicious sauce from Korea, and something in that cross-reacted with the penicillin, and so you accidentally set up the problem there. And then, of course, your immune system just changing due to hormones, getting older, all sorts of stuff. So those 4 things together can mean that out of nowhere it happens. And it was very good that you live in a country where you had fast access to that you didn't die. I'm so happy, Dr. Bruce.
Yeah, well, I said they called an ambulance and they were there. I can't remember if they gave me the needle, the
EpiPen?
The EpiPen or anything like that, but I sort of came to in the hospital on a drip. So,
and you were alive. What a happy ending!
I was, yes.
Thanks, Bruce.
And you get to wear a red cap.
Oh, yeah, I can't believe they make him wear a red hat.
I didn't know that.
I
Man,
hope
you
it's
learn something
stylish.
every day.
Yeah. Okay, Connor, you've got a question about saliva. What do you want to know?
Yeah, I was just wondering about saliva and how it sort of communicates with the stomach and lets the stomach know about food coming down, or why your mouth sort of salivates before you eat food and stuff like that.
Very interesting. So when we digest food, actually the very first part of that, it's called the cephalic phase, which means our head and brain, what we're thinking about really. So there's a cephalic and then a gastric in the stomach and then an intestinal in the intestine. So actually, and we've all experienced this, even when you think about or see or smell food, your brain is sending signals for you to start to salivate. But it's interesting, Connor, because it's not really that the saliva then sends signals to the stomach. It's the brain is sending signals to both of those locations. So, yeah, saliva, it's, 99% water. The reason that it is stimulated before we even start to eat is because it's got enzymes that help break down starches and fat. And then it's also protective. So it's protective against other things in the food for our teeth and for our, the lining of our mouth. It's also got immunoglobulins that are protective. So, yeah, it's interesting that pretty much when we get those signals for the saliva, then we also have the stomach getting ready as well. And to the numbers, because I know like Karl and other people love numbers, so about 1.5 litres per day, we can get 4 to 5 meals per minute when we are eating.
What? 4 to 5 meals a minute?
Per minute.
That's a teaspoon.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine it's helping our food go down though.
Yeah.
Not just accumulating, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And Connor, if you want to see it in action, get a slice of lemon and then go to a mirror in the bathroom, point your face at the mirror, open your mouth, lift your tongue so that the tip of your tongue is touching the roof of your mouth, and then you're exposing the underside of your tongue, and buried in there are 2 glands on each side called the sublingual glands. Get that slice of lemon, squirt it underneath your tongue, and on average, you'll see it squirting out the saliva and hitting the mirror.
Really?
It's a bit gross. Wipe the mirror up afterwards, use hand sanitizer, all that sort of stuff, yeah.
Connor, does that
I will
help?
be trying that. Yeah, that does help. Thank you very much.
But isn't it crazy? Even just talking about this and imagining the lemon, I'm already salivating in my mouth, just thinking about the
I had that
sourness
too.
of it.
And that, by the way, is the thing. Is this right, Teresa? It's called the memory circuits or the mimicking circuits, where in my brain, where whatever you're doing,
yeah.
I'll mirror. So if you talk about saliva, I'll start generating saliva. Dr. Teresa.
It is so interesting. The mirroring is so funny. They talk about it for laughing and for, things like even the way that we respond or some sneezing, hiccuping. But yeah, the saliva, it is interesting because we're probably all now salivating.
Yeah.
It's one of the few things, interestingly, that's stimulated by both the fight and flight system, which is sympathetic, as well as the rest and digest system, which is parasympathetic, because it's sort of protective in both ways. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but different kinds of saliva, because we've all probably experienced that when we're stressed, we might feel a bit dry in the mouth. We've still got saliva being produced, but it's a bit thicker.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, Tyler, a change of pace. What's your question?
Hello, doctors. My question for today is how does Bluetooth devices work and all that? Like Bluetooth mouses and Bluetooth headphones.
Okay. So when I was in first year physics way long ago, we built a radio to receive, and it was roughly the size of a microwave today, a small microwave, and it had valves in it. We could have built a smaller one with transistors, but we were going old technology. Okay, now, Tyler, are you familiar with the idea of a pin that's got a little head on it? Like a normal pin you shove through paper. In your phone, there are 5 radio transmitters and receivers. Not only do they receive, they transmit, and they're a bit bigger than the head of the pin, and there's 5 of them. Isn't that amazing?
Okay.
Yeah? So one of them is a radio transmitter receiver that is used to carry your voice to and from the local tower. And another one is used to carry data to and from the local tower. And another one is Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is actually a miniature radio transmitter. The wavelength of that wave, instead of being like 10 metres long, is roughly the distance across the palm of your hand, about 10 centimetres across. So that's Wi-Fi. And then there's one for Bluetooth. And that's roughly the same frequency. And I'll just chuck another one in. There's also a receiver for GPS. Those satellites, 20,000 kilometres up, doing 12,000 kilometres an hour. Getting back to the Bluetooth one, it's a fairly weak transmitter receiver. It's got a range of maybe 5 metres, but it is in fact a genuine radio transmitter, even though it's only a bit bigger than the head of a pin. The Wi-Fi, they've successfully cranked the amount of grunt that they can feed into it, so it can transmit up to 10 metres, now 20 metres maybe. So what Bluetooth is just a radio receiver transmitter, usually used for short range, like talking to a speaker on your desk, or you're in the car and it talks to the car system. Is that kind of answering your question?
Yeah. I was more just seeing how the Bluetooth system works with everything, how we have so much Bluetooth machines now and everything.
Well, Bluetooth has changed, but still, if you've got a two-way Bluetooth, in other words, you can Bluetooth voice to somebody and they can Bluetooth back to you, the audio quality is slightly down from if you've got one-way Bluetooth, like your phone is talking to your home amplifier. In that case, it's got a better signal and it gives you a more accurate reproduction of sound.
Thanks, Tyler. We've got Paul in Brisbane here. Dr. Paul, what's your question?
Oh, hi, guys. Doctors. It's a tricky one. A few months ago, I was lying on my couch, relaxed, watching a movie, living my best life, and this thing hit me like a freight train out of nowhere. My heart started to race. I started to tremble. I felt an impending feeling of doom, burning in my scalp and my mouth. So I called an ambulance, of course. And went to the doctor, went to the hospital, got all the checks done, and this condition has become chronic now. And anyway, it's been diagnosed as anxiety disorder. But my question is, I'm not anxious. I'm not depressed. I'm not stressed. I want for nothing. I live a great life. And now I have this condition. How can you have these chronic symptoms without feeling anxious?
Paul.
Yeah, gosh, that is a curious question, Paul, and a crazy situation. I'm glad that you are fine of health. So I guess, there is something called, I can't remember the exact name of it. It's a subacute anxiety where people can actually have the physical symptoms of anxiety, but they don't really necessarily have the mental health impacts. But I guess that, there's such a spectrum in terms of mental health and things like anxiety that, our body works in so many crazy ways, and it's still related to things like our fight or flight response and our stress hormones and cortisol. But I think we should also note that there are other hormones that can cause, changes to the way we feel and our heart rate and things like that, like high thyroid hormones can do this, or even low testosterone. And so, it's an interesting one because it does seem more like it's, it is something related to some kind of underlying stress or anxiety, but it's hard to know if you're not aware of it. Yeah, what do you think, Karl?
I've had it once and it scared the heck out of me. I can understand about being anxious because I'm late for an appointment or I forgot to do something, but non-specific anxiety, where you're worried about something but you don't know what it is. And I was doing a gig in some city, and so I got out of the taxi with my 2 bags, and I'm 2 bags, Karl. I can survive indefinitely with my 2 bags, with the audio-visual and my clothes. And suddenly I thought, I'm anxious about something. I didn't know what it was. And I thought, I haven't packed everything. And then on the pavement in the street outside the airport, I started unpacking and repacking my bags. And after about 10 minutes of this irrational behaviour, I thought, it's kind of messy out here. It's noisy. Let me just go inside the airport and do it again. And then after another 10 minutes inside the airport, but still outside security, I was going, there's something wrong, but I don't know what it is. And I was having all the symptoms that you measured. I was really freaking out. And then suddenly I thought, and I was lucky, I thought, I'm probably thinking I've forgotten to pack something, but I know I always pack everything obsessively every time. So I'm just going to ignore it and go past the rent-a-cops and go onto the plane. And in that process of just going past everything, it went away and it never came back again. And I'm glad it happened to me because I've got sympathy for you, Paul. And I'm glad it hasn't happened again because it's really devastating.
Yeah.
Well, see, my condition's it's chronic now. I constantly have pains in my chest and my tummy and my scalp, my head, and feelings of doom nearly every second day. And they're managing it with medication at the moment, and that's all we've done so far with the doctors. So
have they tried exercise and that sort of boring stuff that they mention?
Yeah. And I do get out and I try to live my life, and I am coping, but barely.
It is I think one of the hard things with something like this is that when you've got those physical symptoms, it is impossible not to worry about them, whether you're aware of it or not. And so it's a cycle, because then the more that you worry about those things and you're a bit preoccupied, it continues the stress response. So I think it is, as much as you can, trying to break that stress cycle, and it's doing things like, exercise, getting out, meditation, laughing, crying at a good movie, all those things, and it will probably be a small process, but all of those things will help on a daily basis.
Now, look, I'll make a suggestion that might not work for you. Are you a swimmer?
Not really, no.
Okay, good. Get a swimming coach and you will realise that you swim like crap and your breathing's wrong and your hands are wrong. And so I've had some lower back pain which went away, and I've noticed that when I'm swimming, I'm trying to go, okay, breathe in, hands here, blah, blah, blah. And then if you spend enough time on trying to get your swimming right, eventually you'll end up as a really good swimmer, but also you'll have forgotten about your anxiety. And so I use it now. I do my laps and suddenly it comes to me, I should do this first, then that, and my mind is free. It might work for you and it might not. Okay, and now I'll tell you a little Dawn Fraser story. So Dawn Fraser, you remember the Olympic swimmer? She used to swim up at the Sydney University pool, and she'd just go and do her laps. And every now and then you get these young fit guys, shaped like an inverted pyramid, and they try swimming in the lane next to her to try to beat her and show how tough they are. And effortlessly, she just accelerate and just leave them behind and not have any effort while they're sort of going, splashity, splashity, splashity. So try and go for a swimming coach and learn how to swim correctly. And along the way, you might be lucky.
You're doing breath work, that kind of thing. Paul, thanks for telling your story. I hope you can find a kind of solution soon.
Thank you, guys. I love you guys. Thank you.
Love you too.
We love you too. And if you are having trouble breaking some cycles when it comes to mental health, you can always call Lifeline on 13 11 14. We've got Ronan in Brisbane now. Ronan, you've got a question about electric vehicles. What do you want to know?
Hi, doctors. My question is, if you charge your electric vehicle just from a normal non-renewable energy source, are they any better for the environment than a petrol or diesel-powered vehicle?
Yes, they are, simply because of the magic word efficiency. And specifically in physics, efficiency means energy in versus energy out. Imagine you've got a tank, maybe full of electricity, maybe full of diesel or petrol, and it's got 100 units of energy in it. If it's a petrol or diesel car, out of that 100 units of energy, about 30 will be used to generate heat, which is wasted, and about 30 will be used to overcome friction, and only 30 or so will actually push you down the road, diesel and petrol. But with a battery, about 90% pushes you down the road. A car engine is incredibly complicated. It's got so many moving parts. So just that thing alone improves it, and the payback time in energy is something around, I think, 40,000 kilometres. So if you're doing 15,000 kilometres a year and you're recharging the car entirely off electricity made from fossil fuels, after 3 years, you're ahead.
Oh.
Oh, and by the way, with wind turbines, the energy payback time is 6 months, which is astonishingly short. And with solar panels, it used to be 18 months, but now they're more efficient. It's down to about 14 months in Sydney and Perth, which are the capital cities with the best sunlight in the world, and about 40 months in Brussels, which is the capital city with the worst sunlight in the world.
Wow.
So go renewable.
Thanks, Ronan. We've got Sue on the Central Coast before we take a break. Sue, what's your question today?
My question's about... Sorry, hello. About when we have metal work put in our bodies, so for a joint replacement or a bone repair, why our bodies don't reject that. Like, I understand it's different to a organ transplant or a splinter that's dirty, but why doesn't our body attack the metal?
Okay, so firstly, with regard to the metal, you don't want it too strong and too weak. If it's too weak, the bone, the metal will break. And if it's too strong, it'll take all of the load, say in your lower leg, and the bone won't. And the bone will then wither away and then no longer marry or osseo-integrate with the metal. So thin titanium turns out to be perfect because it's got the right amount of strength and elasticity, but also it develops an oxide coating. Now think about rust. Normally, rust, like on iron, has two bad properties. It flakes off, in other words, it doesn't stick, and it's porous. And so you've got a bit of iron, you leave it out in the open, it rusts, the top layer flakes off, more water and air comes through, that flakes off, and eventually left with a rust stain. Now with titanium and with stainless steel, you get a coating of rust, titanium oxide or chromium oxide, which is tightly adherent, so it sticks like crazy, and it's not porous. So you develop this coating, which, and we're so lucky, it's as impervious and non-reactive as gold. So gold is called the peasant's wealth because you're a peasant in the countryside, another war comes along, you bury the gold underground, you die, but your kids dig it up for 20 years and it's fine. So titanium oxide, firstly, is non-reactive, but secondly, it's got little holes and the tissues of your bone can osseointegrate. But the main reason why you can do it and not have a reaction is that it's as neutral as gold. And so for some reason your body doesn't like it. There's a whole separate thing though with how much gold you can have in your whole life because it's used for some sort of autoimmune reactions. That's a whole different thing. The main thing is that your body doesn't react against it and it provides a good mesh for the bone cells to grow into.
Teresa?
Yeah, that's all right. It's so interesting. And so, yeah, that's right. It's mostly about the coating aspect, that it can integrate with the tissues. And it's also about, though, what metal can withstand the harsh environment of our body as well. So it has to be something that's a combination of those things.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sue.
Brett on the GC. What do you want to know?
Good morning, doctors. Love your work.
Love you.
Love you
Awesome.
too.
So I've got a big beard and I always get questioned about how I can have a beard, like how do I deal with the itching? Now, it usually itches for like the first week and then it hasn't itched since. And, so why does hair itch when it grows, but not all the hair, not all the time? Like, I've shaved my head and when it grows back, it doesn't itch. But beard hair tends to itch.
Very interesting. I have no experience in that myself. But, so it's interesting because we do have different kinds of hair follicles on our scalp compared to on our face and different proportions of sweat glands and things like that. So that's not sort of a classic thing that, there's a reason for why hair growth or hair can itch. But, I mean, it probably will also depend on how you shave it and if that irritates the skin or if you're using any products or if it becomes maybe a bit dry. I wonder if it's also because then if your facial skin is more exposed, it might be a little bit more dry. But, I mean, hair's interesting anyway. Like we have these different phases where there is this growth phase and that can last for several years, which is why hair on the head and beards can grow so long. And then it goes into this resting phase and then it goes into a falling out phase. Okay. So, hair is very interesting. People have changes during pregnancy because the hormones cause all the hair to sit in the resting phase. And then when those hormones drop off after pregnancy, they all kind of fall out. So you usually get thicker head hair during pregnancy. That doesn't answer your question here about the beard, but you've also got, effects of your hormones and testosterone. But I wonder if it's more that once the hair comes off, then the skin's a little bit more exposed.
So ultimately you're saying just stop scratching.
Yeah, and because once you scratch, that's the different thing, isn't it? When you've got an itch and you scratch it, you set off such a cycle because then you're causing more histamine, which causes more itching.
Got to control yourself, Karl.
Now, can I ask a question without notice?
Yeah.
So with regard to the hair, what is it that in some people who have had chemotherapy, suddenly they get curly hair where it used to be straight or vice versa? Yeah. I've never been able to find an answer. Have you found one?
I have. I've actually written an article in the conversation about that includes that.
Go to the conversation. You're in the conversation. Oh, my God. I'm going there.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a pre-planned question. No. I was like, what's Karl going to ask me? He's like on the spot. So, this is really interesting. Yeah. So it can also happen with pregnancy. But one of the reasons is because hair is an example of incomplete dominance. So we've got the curly hair gene that's a dominant gene and the straight hair gene that's a recessive gene, but we can actually get mixing of those genes to make wavy hair. And we see lots of people with wavy hair. Now, that the shape of our hair or the type of our hair depends on the shape of the follicle and the keratin and whether the hair comes out kinked. But what happens is that some people might have a curly hair and a straight hair gene, and actually it's the straight hair that's sort of a little bit more dominant in their early days. And then when people have chemotherapy, it can actually have genetic effects that affect the hair follicle, and it could cause the other gene to become more dominant. So it usually happens in people who have got both a curly hair and a straight hair gene, and the other one becomes more dominant because the chemotherapy will affect the hair growth. It stops it. It stops all those rapidly dividing cells. And then when it starts again, there's genetic effects literally on the on the hair. So they did experiments with pigs as well and looked at how they can change the hair follicle with different chemicals, and hormones can do this as well. Some people find that after pregnancy, their hair is more curly.
Wow.
And what's the difference, if you look at it with a microscope or an electron microscope, between straight and curly hair? Is it that the straight hair is sort of circular and the curly hair is oval? Or is it on a molecular level that there are more sulfur or charged amino acids, or something else I haven't thought of?
It's both of those things.
Oh, really?
So, really interesting that the hair follicle of straight hair is a perfect circle.
Right.
And so that forms a perfectly straight hair.
So it's equally resistant to a push this way or that way from the left or the right or the front or the back.
Whereas
but an oval?
Curly, so an oval is, say, curly hair, and then really elliptical is a coiled hair. So essentially curly hair is all about asymmetry. So first of all, you've got asymmetry of the hair follicle, which means the hair grows out at an angle. It's a bit kinked. But then because it's growing out at that angle and it's kinked, it's the disulfide bonds that you sort of alluded to. Yeah, that they end up sort of attaching to each other more closely, which further kinks it. So as it grows out kinked here, all these disulfide bonds connect, pulls it this way, but then it kinks back out the other way. So,
So if you've got a pole that's shaped like an oval in cross-section, it's weak across the short distance, but stronger across the long distance.
That's a good way
and
of
that's part of
thinking.
the sort of the pre-setup for it to make it fall over and go into a circle. Wow.
Yeah, true.
I'll read
And
your
then
article.
it pulls it in and out.
And what's your article called?
Something like how hormones and chemotherapy change your hair.
I'm onto it.
Lance out of Maxville. Lance, what do you want to know?
G'day, doctors. I recently read a Dr. Karl statement stating that 40 tonnes of water crosses the membranes of a 70-kilogram human body every day. I'm not asking for a fact check, but it made me wonder, when a human body is immersed in water, such as a bathtub or a swimming pool, the ocean, is there, aside from the obvious urination, is there any exchange of water molecules between the human body and the body of water? And what is happening to the fingers and toes in that instance?
Lucky there is no exchange of water between what we're in and our body. But yeah, that fact from Dr. Karl is absolutely correct. So we are moving fluid, across our trillions of cells all the time. It's actually one of the things that costs our body a lot of energy. So that's a big part of our metabolic rate is, moving things between different cells, between compartments. But yeah, to your question, Lance, about the, exchange between a body of water, for example. So our skin has a really important role in waterproofing us. And especially there's a layer in the top part of your skin that's made up of lipids, essentially. So it's an oily layer. So that means that water can't get out because we don't want to dehydrate and have our blood volume leave, but it also means that water can't get in. So we have this really nice layer there, but you can get, one of the things that I know about wrinkling of the skin is that you get a little bit of water absorption into the very outer layer called the stratum corneum, but that absorption is limited and then it won't go further because you've got the lipid layer deep to that.
And by the way, with regard to that water, I got that fact from Guyton, Guyton. It's a physiology textbook, and it's in it's somewhere inside the version I read a long time ago.
It's a huge, amazing textbook.
Have fun reading physics.
Thanks, Lance. We've got Damo in Victoria. What's going on?
G'day, doctors. My question's regard to hearing. Every now and then I get like a high pitch in my ear. Happens sporadically. Just wondering what's going on. My ear's trying to auto-calibrate or what the go is.
Damo.
Sounds like tinnitus. Do you think, Karl, as well?
Yeah. So read the article by Karl Zimmer, Carlzimmer. Look up Karl Zimmer Discover. You can read the article for free. It's a really good explanation, but basically it's happening in your brain, not in your ear.
It's a really interesting thing because we cannot objectify tinnitus because it's something that only we hear in our head. So it's something that's really difficult to understand, especially to understand the pathophysiology and the cause and to describe it to someone else. So it can be quite frustrating for the person. It usually comes from, if you've had a lot of noise exposure. I'm not sure if you've been to a lot of loud concerts or, with or industrial kind of noise. It can also happen if someone does have hearing loss, but they think that it's damage to the nerves that carry sound, or an increase in fluid pressure, because sometimes you can get that when you've also got a bit of a cold, but it can also be that you've got this damage. And they always say that if you focus on that sound, that it helps it go away, because your brain is then sort of putting attention to it to the point where it's like, oh my God, I've had enough of this. Let me ignore that.
Because it can just drive people mental as well. And so you're saying that, let's say I'm getting a hearing test done and I'm having that high-pitched sound. It's not registering on any test or anything.
Not that I know of. I don't know if you know about that, Karl, but it's more also that you can't, nobody else can understand.
And people have been so distressed by it that they have said, I would rather have my hearing totally destroyed and be totally deaf rather than have to put up with this sound. So it can be very distressing.
Look after your ears. Make sure you're wearing earplugs at gigs. That is our public service announcement. Dr. Karl, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And Dr. Teresa Larkin for joining us for another episode. Just quickly, if we want to find where you are, where can we look on socials?
Dr. Teresa Larkin on Instagram and X, and on the internet, I suppose, anywhere else. Yeah.
Fabulous. And that's it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Science with Dr. Karl, and a big thank you to Dr. Teresa Larkin for joining us. If you want to check out her socials or that article we mentioned, I've popped it for you down in the show notes. And if you want to check out more with Dr. Teresa Larkin, she's a regular on The Hookup, and you can check out their podcast wherever you get yours, wherever you're listening to this, be it YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or of course the Triple J app. My name is Lucy Smith. This episode was produced by Sarah Harvey, and we'll catch you next week. Have a good one.
Dave Marchese here from the Triple J Hack team. Hey, if you love Dr. Karl's podcast like I do, you might enjoy the Hack podcast as well. Each day we bring you the news that matters to you, from the latest science on climate change to what's happening in politics and news around the world. The Hack Podcast. It's your daily fix of the news you need to know. Get it wherever you're listening now.